Hi, my love. Welcome to the Gemma Hanley podcast. My name is Gemma. I'm your host. This is the space where I have honest conversations about overcoming anxiety and overwhelm so that you can calm your nervous system and feel really confident and happy and calm from within yourself. Along the way, I share my own stories of holistically healing 23 years of anxiety and depression myself. And so if you're a woman seeking answers to perfectionism, people-pleasing, burnout, resistance, you may love, you're in the right place. Let's do it. Let's begin. And before we begin, I want to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which I am recording from, which is the Gubbi Gubbi tribe. And I want to extend that acknowledgement to their elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as anybody of Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander heritage watching this replay. Hi, my love. Welcome back to the Gemma Hanley podcast for another episode. Interestingly, this week, the topic that I'm bringing floated into my awareness last night, just as I was drifting off to sleep. I had this creative download and I thought, that's cool, love it. And I asked my subconscious to remind me of it this morning because I was at that stage of drifting to sleep where I was almost there and I just wasn't prepared to get up for that creative idea. Instead, I trusted that I was brilliant enough and intelligent enough that it wasn't a fluke and it would very much still be in my awareness in the morning. And that's exactly what happened when I woke up this morning before I'd even opened my eyes. The topic of today's podcast, which was just, a thought at that time, was front and center for me. And so we're taking it, we're grabbing it, we're running with it. Second week in a row that the plans have changed slightly. I'm not sure if you listened to last week's episode 59. I talked about how I've been comparing myself to another woman. If you haven't, go back and have a listen because it was one of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded. Love using myself as an example in real time when I'm working through something and it's showing up. But that also wasn't the plan for last week's podcast episode. Something I've become really good at is being flexible and adaptable. And so when I have an intuitive drop in or a hit that there's a message that's really important to deliver, that just, things move around and we make it happen. We switch on the mic and we go. So here we are. And today's topic is all around conflict in relationships and how, just a slight tweak in our communication style can either take something from 0 to 100, create triggers in multiple different nervous systems and distance and disconnection in a relationship, or can save us from that whole exercise, which can sometimes become hours upon hours, maybe even days, where there is this feeling of being shut down, walls up, feelings hurt, feeling misunderstood, feeling rejected, questioning a relationship when, if we really focus on our communication style and making a few little tweaks and incorporating some new techniques, we don't even have to live that experience a lot of the time. And so what I'm going to share with you today is actually so fucking simple. It is so simple and it is so quick and yet extremely powerful. Like I would go as far as to say it has changed my life and my relationships. And I absolutely believe it can do the same for you too. And something I love about this communication technique that I'm going to share is you can use it yourself very, very easily, but you can also use it when you are on the receiving end of communication from a loved one to help them to feel more understood and for you to be 100% clear on how you can best love them and meet their needs in a moment of when they're sharing and communicating with you. So let's dive in. What I'm going to share with you, it forms the very beginning of communication. Now, I'm talking in the context of maybe more sensitive conversations where you might be feeling nervous. You might be feeling really sensitive and really vulnerable. It could be something that's really hard for you to share, and it might have nothing to do with the person you're sharing it with, but it's something you feel like, you want to maybe get off your chest, you want to feel seen or heard in. It's something that you're struggling with, and you feel like maybe if you were to share it outwardly, that would help, and you might gain some more insights on what to do about it. It might be a boundary setting conversation, right? So it might have something to do with another person, which could include sharing something that is not okay with you, sharing something that you'd like to ask for. Yeah, maybe something you'd like to ask for more of. There's already some of that present in your connection with this other person and you love it, but you want to make it known how much you love that and that you would like more of it. Or maybe there's a change that you want to make in an existing relationship dynamic. And all of these types of conversations can really stimulate the nervous system, have us feeling quite uncomfortable, maybe stuck up in our heads. And, at times we struggle to articulate what it is that we're wanting to say. And so when we do a little bit of reflecting, just very briefly before we bring this conversation, we not only empower ourselves to get more from the conversation, we also empower the other person to understand what we need, and we can ask for that as well. So, typically speaking, when we bring a conversation like this that I've just explained and just described, there are one of three things that we will want. The first is maybe we are just wanting to be listened to. Yeah, so we're just wanting to be seen and heard. We're not looking for advice. We're not looking for comparable stories. We're not looking to be cheered up. We actually are just looking to have the experience of being witnessed, feeling seen, feeling like we're significant enough to bring a voice and to speak some words and to share, right? Because when we share about what is true for us, what's going on in our inner world, what we like, what we don't like, what we're struggling with, what we're celebrating, whatever it might be, that builds connection. That is how another person learns about us and understands us as well. And so this is the first category, is maybe we just want to be listened to. Yeah. I'm going to stay with this one and just talk about it a little bit more, actually. I was going to go through all three and come back, but we're not going to do that. When you're on the receiving end, yeah, so like I said to you at the start of this conversation, for everything I share, you're going to be able to listen to this through, okay, how can I try this on a little bit more in terms of asking for what I need, communicating what I want, but also how can I be the person that does this for another as well? And so when somebody else is simply wanting to be listened to, they're not looking for your feedback, they're not looking for your affirmation or approval or to be pumped up or to say everything's going to be okay or to share, your comparable stories. They literally just want to be listened to. Yeah. Part of what can make you an incredible listener is learning how to do that in an engaged way. For a lot of us, we'll have a natural default of either just like feeling really awkward and not knowing where to look, not knowing what to do. Or we might be on the other end of the scale where we can't shut up and actually listen. And so we're interrupting the person. Maybe we have the most pure intentions and we love them and we see their brilliance and like everything that's available for them. And so we just want to talk to them about all of that and solve their problem for them because we're not comfortable with seeing somebody sitting in pain, right? Maybe we're not familiar with the concept of unsolicited advice. We don't realize that not everyone wants our opinion. Yeah. And even if someone wants our opinion sometimes, it doesn't mean they want it all of the time. And so becoming the person that can listen to a loved one when they want to share will be learning how to realize we actually don't know what's best for another person all of the time, right? And that they don't want to hear our advice or be a project or be problem solved all of the time, right? And so part of, what I'm sharing with you here around these different communication styles or techniques is that it's going to require us to look inwards to be able to use this. Yeah. Because if we're not comfortable with another person sitting in vulnerability, maybe sitting in front of us and sharing and becoming teary or feeling overwhelmed, and we feel like we need to jump in and say something or touch them and, comfort them or tell them it's going to be okay when actually they've just asked to be listened to, that's powerful data that we're collecting about ourselves and our own ability to sit with discomfort or to sit with difficult emotions, right? And so part of what an engaged listener might look like is making eye contact. Yeah, so that this person knows you're present with them and you're listening to them, right? There's no devices. You're not picking up your phone. In fact, you've probably switched it on silent and turned it over or put it in your bag, put it away. You've turned the TV off. If you're distracted by anything because, the oven's on and the food's about to burn, you say, can you just let me sort this situation so that I can come back and be totally present with you? Yeah. And it's also a checking in with yourself. Like, can I offer this right now? This person's asking to be listened to. Am I available for that? Can I offer this right now? And if it's a no, then it's communicating that in a loving way, like, oh, I would absolutely love to listen to what you have to say. I can tell I just cannot be present right now. Would it be okay if we do this in an hour? Would it be okay if we do this once the kids have gone to bed tonight? Yeah, some examples there. Other engaged listening techniques. Nodding, yeah, or even making sounds of like, yeah, okay. Little affirmations like that you're following along, that you are hearing what's being said. And if at any point you're confused or you're not sure, really gently sharing that so that you can clarify from the perspective of understanding this person, not to tell them what to do, not so that you know what to say back to them, but so that you can truly connect and understand what it is that they're wanting to share and be heard in. So that's the first of three things you might be desiring when you're bringing a conversation is I just want to be listened to. Yeah. The second might be that you're desiring solidarity. And what this means is you're wanting to know that you're not alone. You're wanting to know that other people have had this experience too. Yeah. You're wanting to hear that you are not unique and that others can understand where you're at, have experienced it themselves, and really affirm that, like, maybe a path that you're walking down in your life right now that is feeling really challenging and really hard, that others have walked down that path too, right? And so what this would sound like is, I have something that I want to share with you. I have something that I'd love to chat to you about. And just so that you know, I'm just wanting to, hear that you've maybe experienced something similar as well, right? And so you're communicating that before you share. With each of these things, you're communicating them before you share. So with the just wanting to be listened to, it's, hey, I've got something I'd really like to share or I really need to talk about. And before I do, I just want to let you know that where I'm at with this, I just really want to be listened to. I'm not looking for advice. I'm not looking for comparable stories or your version of when you've I really just want to be listened to. That's all I need right now. Is that okay with you? Yeah. So that's solidarity. And the reason why this is so important to understand, again, if you're maybe on the receiving end of a conversation, is that if you start sharing, oh, yeah, yep, I felt that way too, or oh, yeah, this sounds really similar to when XYZ. Yeah. And you're sharing from your heart with the best of intentions. And the person you're sharing with, who has just opened up really vulnerably and really, with a lot of sensitivity, wasn't looking for that type of response or love or support from you, they can actually feel really minimized. And what you are classing as maybe a similar or a comparable experience of solidarity, they might not. And I know personally, and I'm sure if we all thought about it hard enough, we'd have an instance of this where we almost feel like worse and even more misunderstood when we're on the receiving end of that and it's not what we're looking for, or we don't actually feel that it's comparable at all to the experience that we're going through, right? So that's number two. Number three is opinion and feedback. Yeah. So coming to that conversation before you begin and start sharing would look like, hey, there's something important I want to chat to you about, and I'd actually really love your opinion and feedback on it. Is that something you're available for? When could we do that? Where you're actually inviting the person to give their opinion, to give their feedback. And, one of the words that is used a lot in my relationship is reflections. Yeah, reflecting back what we're seeing in each other. And so this can be the type of communication that is often jumped to, and it's assumed that it's what somebody wants. And again, we've probably all been on the receiving end of an instance where we open our heart and we share in a really vulnerable way, and then the person just goes into solution mode, or they start telling us what they think we should do, or they say, have you looked at this and have you looked at that? And we have this experience inside where it's almost like we start like deflating like a balloon going down because that is not what we were after. Yeah. And it almost feels overwhelming. And again, like maybe we haven't actually even been heard or understood in what we were sharing. Now, when we're having this experience, and it's funny because, a lot of what I teach and how this piece, communication technique is a perfect example of this. It's come from me living life, having these experiences, and then getting curious about, well, what could I do differently so I don't have that experience again, right? So when I open my heart and I share vulnerably, and another person starts dishing out their feedback or their advice, and I'm like, maybe even triggered, yeah, of like, oh, like, why? No, like, I'm not after your opinion. Yeah. And maybe I even feel like, oh, I've actually got this sorted. I know where I'm going with this. I was just looking for some empathy and to be listened to. And that happened enough times that I realized, okay, well, if I actually started the conversation having reflected on what I want from that other person. Yeah. So being clear in myself first, because a lot of the time I hadn't been clear. Yeah. I knew that I wanted to feel connection. I knew that I wanted to feel less alone. I knew that I wanted to feel understood. But I didn't know in which way, whether it was through feeling listened to, feeling solidarity, or receiving some advice or an opinion or feedback. I hadn't thought through that enough. And so when I opened my heart and went into conversations without thinking about that, I was actually setting us both up for potential conflict, right? And instances where I would even need to say, oh, could we actually just stop here for a second? I really don't want feedback. I really don't want an opinion. I actually just want to be listened to. Now, there's nothing wrong with that happening, but that has the potential to, if that creates a trigger in somebody else, or maybe they then go into fawn mode where they feel like, oh my gosh, I've done the wrong thing. I've totally upset her. Or even self-judgment of like, oh my gosh, I totally read this wrong. Who do I think I am? Like, of course she didn't want my opinion, right? Or maybe even into fight mode of like, well, why are you talking to me about this then? Or why didn't you tell me that you didn't want my opinion, right? All of these little pieces can start happening. Some of them might be verbalized, like I've just given the examples. Other times they'll be internal, and it will create like a shutting down, a closing of the heart, and a disconnection in the relationship that someone might not have the emotional intelligence to be able to name, right? Maybe they feel embarrassed. Maybe they feel ashamed. Maybe they feel shut down. Maybe they feel rejected. And all of a sudden, the conversation that one person was bringing to feel seen and heard and loved in has become completely about another thing, and sometimes completely about the other person. And if this happens enough times, that first person that was coming to feel supported and loved and seen and heard will probably stop bothering to do that, because that current relationship dynamic will teach them, when I bring a vulnerable conversation, my loved one gets triggered, it becomes all about them, and it ends up in a fight that feels like more hard work than just keeping my challenge or my pain or my suffering or my desires to myself. So I'm just going to keep them to myself. And this is why I said, it's such a simple technique, but the flow on effect is fucking enormous, right? So next, I want to summarize what I've just been through, and how you would bring it to a conversation, and also how you would bring it to a conversation for yourself, but also how you would bring it for a conversation for another. Like if they want to share with you and you need this clarity first. And so that would look like, okay, so let's say you're bringing a sensitive conversation, a vulnerable conversation. That would look like you saying something like, hey, there's something I'd really love to share. There's something I'd really love to talk to you about. And before we get into it, I just want to let you know that this is something that at the moment, I really just want XYZ. Yeah. So I really just want to be listened to. I'm not looking for your own experiences or your opinion. I really just want to be heard in this so that I don't feel, like I'm holding it alone. Or it might be, I just want you to know, if you're open to it, like I'd love to hear any similar experiences you've had, because I'm feeling like I'm going crazy. I'm feeling like I'm the only person having this experience, and that it could be really helpful for me to know that what I'm going through is actually pretty normal. Yeah. And then the third example would be, what I'd love actually, once I've explained what's going on for me, is if you could give me, your opinion and your feedback, in a really loving way. And so that's how you ask for it when you're bringing the conversation. And of course, you need to do the reflection before you show up to the conversation of how you want to be received, how you want to be loved and supported by this other person. Now, let's talk about you being on the receiving end of a vulnerable, boundary setting, sensitive, intimate style conversation. And the other person just leaps into it. Yeah. Because this can happen. And, I really want to validate that this is important as an early stage of being more honest, being more open-hearted, setting boundaries. The early stages of growing emotional intelligence is that sometimes we just need to get the conversation out. Like it has been spiraling around in our mind, our nervous system's super stimulated. We feel so uncomfortable. And it's like, oh my gosh, I just need to go and have this conversation. And it can sometimes feel for the other person like it's coming out of nowhere, because we are so stimulated and in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response that we aren't able to consider a whole lot more beyond ourselves, definitely not as much as we normally would. And so sometimes we even forget, oh my gosh, this other person, like they haven't been thinking about this thing as much as me, or they might not even be aware that I'm even having this experience right now. And so sometimes we just leap into the conversation. We don't check, if the person's available, if it's a good time for them. And we certainly haven't thought about what need we have in that conversation and how we would like to be loved and supported by them. So if you find yourself on the receiving end of that, where a loved one is just jumping into a conversation, a really powerful way to love them and to prevent any conflict taking place or any confusion or misunderstanding taking place is by saying to them, hey, I really want to do the best I can in listening to you and loving on you and supporting you in this conversation. So before you go any further, I just want to ask, are you looking to be purely listened to here? Yeah, where you don't really, you don't want my opinion or you don't want me to say anything, or are you maybe looking to feel more companionship, like you want to hear if I've had experiences like this? Or are you looking, for some advice? Do you want my opinion? Do you want my feedback? Because if I can just be clear on that from the start, I'm going to know which way to listen to you and what you want from this conversation. Yeah. And so that can, one, be like so loving and helpful to be on the receiving end of when you're bringing a hard conversation and an honest conversation. But it can also very much empower you to understand how to have this go the best way it can possibly go. Yeah. So that's how to use this communication technique. Like I said, super simple. There's 3 things you or another will want from a hard conversation. If it's your conversation, reflect before you go into it and then ask for it at the start. And if it's the other person, lovingly create a pause and ask them, which of these 3 things are you looking for from me in this conversation? I want to talk to you now about like some more of the nuances of what can be happening and what goes on beyond this communication technique. But even if all you took from this episode was what we've already been through, that would be incredible. I can guarantee that has enormous potential to completely shift the dynamic and the trajectory of your relationships and reduce conflict enormously. But let's talk about some of the nuances as well. Because sometimes what can happen is a person can say they want something, but they don't realize they want something else. Right. And again, when we're in a nervous system reactive state, which might be a trauma being activated, whether we're aware of it or not, a pattern from childhood is coming through into our current day adult world. Or it might be a topic that we just feel really nervous or uncomfortable about, for example, in intimate relationships, like talking about your desires or what you might like to try or what you might like to shift or change in the space of sex and in the space of money can be really overwhelming and uncomfortable for some people. And maybe even if you're comfortable bringing the conversation, your partner might not be comfortable receiving it, right? I've definitely had that experience. And so this is one of those instances where it's really important to like observe and learn and collect information about what's happening in your relationship. And I can say this in the most simple way of actions speak louder than words, right? And so if somebody is consistently, and this isn't just an intimate relationship, broader ones too, but if someone is consistently asking you for your opinion, for your feedback, but they then become maybe a little bit cold, maybe a little bit distant, maybe a little bit closed down. You feel like you're being pushed away. And that is happening over and over and over again every time they ask you for your opinion, your feedback, your reflections, or, alternatively, maybe they then go into like, oh, actually, everything's fine. Yeah, there's no problems here. It's all sorted, right? Even though you've both spent time having a really deep conversation about something that is very clearly painful to that person. And so they go into like deflecting or pretending everything's fine when it's not. And that may or may not, feel uncomfortable for you, be something that you don't enjoy experiencing. then that can be really important for you to take into account. Yeah. And there's a couple of different approaches that you can have here. It might be that you share this in a really loving way of, hey, I've noticed you're asking for my opinion, which I love, and I'm happy to spend the time with you, giving you my opinion and, my feedback and my reflections. But then there's often some distance created after that, like you don't like what I've said, or I can feel at times like maybe it's creating a disconnection, and you get to have a conversation about that. Yeah. Um, and that can be really like such a beautiful healing experience in a relationship where you bring that. And then next time it unfolds where you share a reflection or give some feedback and there's this shutting down, walls go up, um, there's some distance created where you can share in a really loving way. Hey, this is, what's happening right now. This is, what I was sharing with you about. I'm feeling like you're a little bit distant. Maybe you're upset with me for the advice or the feedback that I've given you. And I'm not sure what it is that you want because, you know, you I checked and you asked for the feedback and the advice, so I gave it to you, but it also seems like you're maybe not so happy with that. So, and then you get to have a conversation about that too. Other people won't have the capacity for that level of honest communication, which will be part of the reason why they're shutting down and creating distance when you're honest with them with the feedback they've asked for. Yeah, they've literally asked for your opinion, your feedback, your reflections. And then they go into a shutdown mode. And so yeah, depending on what's important to you, how close the relationship is, how important the relationship is, you might just decide that it's not a relationship that is aligned, or it's not a relationship that's aligned in the same way. So you're going to shift the intensity or frequency of that relationship, or maybe just decide within yourself, I'm actually not prepared to share feedback, honestly, in this relationship because it doesn't go well. And it might be a relationship that is then one you spend a little less time in because you value honest conversations. I'm not sure. Yeah, only you can figure that out. That's definitely true for me, though. Honest conversations and like the truth is a non-negotiable for me in my closest relationships. The second nuance that I want to speak to you about is when somebody is asking you, and I'm sure we've all been here too, they're either asking you or you're doing the check-in of like, what do you want from me in this conversation? Do you just want to be listened to? Do you want to feel some solidarity? Are you looking for some feedback? And they are consistently saying, oh, I really just want to be listened to. I just want to be heard. I just want to be witnessed. I really just need you to listen to me because I need somebody to speak to, right? And as a result of that, you're starting to feel like they're dumping on you. Yeah. That you've become their space for projecting all of their complaints, all of the things they find challenging. And that's just like a vent session. And it might even be getting to the point where it's starting to deplete your own energy. You're feeling uncomfortable. It's feeling thoroughly unenjoyable. You might even be dreading the conversation with this person because you really feel like consistently they're just sharing to complain. They're just sharing to say the same things over and over and over again that aren't working for them, that aren't going right in their life. And they really want confirmation. Like what they're looking for is confirmation that their life is hard and their situation is impossible, right? And you're just getting that on repeat. And they're not really taking any steps, or at least they're not sharing with you that they're proactively looking to change this. So there's also two approaches that you can take in this scenario with your communication so that you can honor and respect your own needs, your own values, your own desires, whilst also being really honest in a kind and loving way. Yeah. And often directness is the most kind and loving way. When we sugarcoat things, when we only say half of what's true for us, when we try and set a boundary that means we just get to avoid someone instead of actually changing what's happening in the relationship, that's not very loving. Yeah. What actually ends up happening is the other person is confused and they're not receiving the truth about how you feel, what you need, what's important to you. And they, here's how I love to explain this. Imagine you found out that one of your friends or one of your loved ones was doing you a favor by listening to you or hanging out with you, and they actually were not enjoying it and they didn't really want to be doing it. It's probably not something that feels good to learn, yeah, or to be on the receiving end of. And that's why, with my coaching and how I live my life, the level of emotional intelligence that we're talking about here is this like fiercely loving yourself, and not fierce as in get the fuck out of my way, get the fuck out of my life by any means. No. Fierce as in fuck, like I'm almost quivering when I'm having this conversation where I speak my truth and I'm really honest and I'm courageous in my conversations and I set boundaries that are right for me, even though I do not want to hurt this person and it's going to be really difficult. And I wish, it was different, but it's not. Yeah. That's the level of emotional intelligence and fiercely loving yourself that changes your life. Yeah. And releases other people to find other relationships and other experiences that are a far better match for them, with people that genuinely want to listen to them and genuinely want to engage with them in that way. And so long as you're pretending that you want to play this role for that person, you're taking up a space that somebody else could be taking up instead, that's a far better fit for them. So, what do you do about it, right? You feel like you're being vented on. And often these people are really good at speaking and there's not too many spaces where you can interrupt them, and you're trying to listen because you want to respect them, but you're also thinking like, how do I wind this up? Or like, how do I stop this from happening? Because I then leave this conversation and I'm irritated and like my energy's drained and now I'm not enjoying my life in the same way or in the way that I was before the conversation. So, two things. The first is a really powerful question that is subtle and kind is, what are you thinking about? What do you think you'll do about this? Yeah. What do you think you'll do about this? It communicates a couple of things. The first is, this is not mine, this is yours, right? So, what do you think you'll do about this, right? And the second is, it can redivert the conversation a little bit. Yeah. So you're still listening. You haven't given advice. You're curiously trying to understand this person, but it communicates, hey, I'm a solution focused person. Yeah. I'm here for the mess and the hardship and the difficulty and the darkness and the pain. And we don't have to live and unpack here. Yeah. And the types of conversations I'm available to have are about the mess and the pain and the discomfort and the struggle and what we're doing about it. Yeah. So I'm not suggesting you could say that out loud if you wanted to in a really loving, kind way. But this question in and of itself has the ability to communicate that too. Yeah. What do you think you'll do about this? Yeah, this sounds really difficult. What do you think you're going to do about it? Yeah. If that isn't hitting home, or you're just not interested at all at continuing to being on the end of complaining, you've got the opportunity to share your own boundary. Yeah. And so that can look like saying, I really love you and I care about you and I want to support you. And I have to share with you and be really honest. I have a limit to how much listening I'm available for. Yeah. Something that I really value is a solution focus. Yeah. And um, each person in this world taking ownership for the changes that they want to see in their life. And, you know, I'm available to listen to the hardships and the challenges and the things that are not going well, but there's only so much I can listen to of that. And so then you can insert here what your boundary is around that. Yeah, so that might be how frequently you're available to, like, for some of you, you might be fucking facilitating these conversations where you're somebody's sounding board for all of their complaints. This might be like daily for you, right? And so that might look like, I can have a chat with you on the phone once a fortnight. I can't tell you what that is because I'm not you, right? You're going to have to do some inner reflection and get curious about what is the boundary? What am I available for? What am I not available for? So that you can communicate that over and over again. And something that I will say as well is that someone who is genuinely interested in changing their life, they're genuinely interested in finding a solution to their discomfort and pain, they will not want to be listened to over and over again. Yeah, they're going to want to hear, hey, like, what have you done? Have you been in this situation and what have you done about it? Or do you know of anyone I could speak to that might be able to help me? What would you do if you were in my situation? Or I'm looking into this and I'm looking into this. Do you know, have you heard anything about these things? Do you have any reflections or information to add that I can put into the mix here for me to consider? Yeah. And if you are someone who feels like a lot of your relationships fit into this category rather of always listening, of always hearing someone vent and complain, I'm going to invite you, my love, to really look at what within you is playing into that pattern. Yeah, because that's a codependent relationship pattern. Because you're getting something from that. You're getting something from being the person that can be trusted, from being the person that is so resilient that they can listen to all of these things, that is so dependable, that is so responsible, that gets to make people feel a little bit better, right? Because you've let them complain to you. So that is definitely something to dig into. If you're a woman sitting here listening to this and thinking, shit, like a lot of my friendships and my relationships and the conversations I'm having are people just complaining to me, or I'm surrounded by people that have really, really difficult lives and aren't really doing much about them, then that's something to look at. Yeah. As well as, and this will be a hard, confronting, maybe even offensive truth to look at. If you're that woman that is showing up to all of your conversations, complaining about everything, talking about everything that's difficult, yeah, that's not bad, it's not wrong, but it's also not moving you forwards. And it's definitely not going to have you attracting relationships that are really exciting or really inspiring, or where there's deep, nourishing soul connection. That will just be absent. And you might even be feeling like, why can't I find those types of friendships? Or why can't I find those types of people? I've spoken before on the podcast about how, we first have to become at least an iteration or a version of what it is that we want to call in, right? Like if we want to be surrounded by happy, uplifting people that can celebrate us in our wins, we need to be able to access those states within ourselves and work with anything that is preventing that or blocking that. If we want to be celebrated, we need to be able to celebrate other people genuinely. Yeah, even if that can feel triggering at times, or we compare ourselves at times, or there's jealousy. It's also looking at that. Like, what is getting in the way of me genuinely being over the moon for this other person? Um, Especially when it's like, oh, they have something that I don't have, right? A little bit of a tangent there. Um, and the last nuance that I wanted to speak to you about in using this communication technique is the opposite of someone venting on you or complaining to you all of the time and just wanting to be listened all of the time, which is they're always wanting your opinion. They're always wanting your advice. They're always wanting your feedback. And it can still have the same draining kind of energy to it for you. And my love, it can definitely also have the same codependent dynamic to you. So if you're surrounded by people that always come to you for advice, and they're coming to you for advice so that they know what to do, not to float an idea by you, or yeah, to get your feedback and then go away and think about what they want to do with that. And if they agree with you or if they disagree with you. Yeah. And even have conversations with you about, oh, yeah, like I see this part, but I don't agree with that. There's a big difference between like healthy connection and receiving honest reflections and feedback from our loved ones versus, outsourcing our power and needing everybody's opinion on everything, or being the person whose opinion is being sought all of the time. Very, very codependent behavior, right? And will keep us stuck at a certain level of relationships where, I need this person to be a certain way and they need me to be a certain way, which reduces our ability to have autonomy, to be free to express in different ways and be who we are, right? And so what often is happening here is that maybe you're being pedestaled. Yeah. So somebody sees your brilliance and decides that you're the best person to inform all of their decisions, because then they don't need to make decisions for themselves. They get to please you. They get to be convenient. They get to be easy to be around, and they don't have to make a choice for themselves, which means they don't have to back themselves. They don't have to trust themselves. And then they also don't have to move through any feelings of learning or maybe even disappointment or embarrassment if they make a choice and realize, oh, okay, retrospectively, I wouldn't have made that choice, which we all experience that. That is literally the definition of evolution and growth. And so, if this is happening as well, there's two ways that you can respond to this in these relationships, right? Because it might feel really draining for you. But you might also have compassion for this person and see, they're really struggling to make a decision for themselves. They don't really know what to do. And so, again, a really clear, beautiful, loving question that you can ask when they ask, what do you think? Or what would you do? Or what do you think I should do here? Is, what do you think? What's your best guess? Yeah. If you had to pick something, what would you pick? I've given you 3 questions. But, shifting the responsibility and the power back to them by asking them, well, what do you think? Yeah. And then your opinion that you might share might be, my opinion is it's really important that you get clear on what you think. Yeah. Or what your best guess would be. Right. So that's one way to approach that. And then the second way, again, is going into sharing your own boundary. Yeah. And, that might look like saying something along the lines of, something that's really important for me in my relationships is that the people I'm connecting with, they know how powerful they are. And they know how intelligent and brilliant and incredible they are. And they back themselves to make their own decisions. And yeah, like we'll have conversations for sure about, what might be an option or what might be one way of tackling something, or, you know, I'm happy to give feedback here and there, but I'm beginning to feel like all of our conversations are about you asking me for advice, or you asking me for what decision you should make. And something that I know is that you're completely capable of making brilliant decisions yourself. And so I'm not going to take that away from you. And what I would love is to really see you making more of these choices for yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. Like, it's okay to not be sure. A lot of the time I make mistakes and I'm not sure. But it's, you know, I really want to share with you that this relationship is going to feel way more fun and enjoyable and connected for me if I'm less of your guide in decision making and, you know, what choices you should make, and more of your friend, or more of your lover, or, you know, more of a soundboard about decisions you're already considering or you're already choosing to make, right? So that's a version of what that could look like. And, you know, inside Reveal and Rise, one of the things that I teach women, and that's really important for you to hear too, is that with boundary setting, there's a whole reflection piece to get clear within ourselves before we're actually going to be ready and able to communicate a boundary in a like loving way that is far more easily received without triggering another person and without offending them and without confusing them or finger pointing and blaming, right? And one of the things that I say to my clients is that if you can't describe to the person you're setting the boundary with, if you can't describe why it's important to you, or like what the values are that you have for setting this boundary, why those things are important to you, what some examples of those are, then it's pretty like unrealistic and unfair to expect somebody else is going to understand that when you can't even understand that in yourself. And so I'm giving you some very like surface level snippety pieces when I've given you these two boundary examples around someone venting towards you, or someone pedestaling you. But I wanted to give you something. But please know that there's some self-reflection that's required before having these conversations to come to your relationships in a very loving, kind, compassionate way. And the flow and effect from that is to prevent conflict, to prevent unnecessary conflict in your relationships, because that is 100% possible. And it also means that you'll feel more confident and more comfortable when you're sharing your heart and your truth and letting people see the real you as well. The last thing that I just wanted to share as a snippet here on all of this and this communication technique that I've shared with you. So going back to, you know, where we started of either, you know, wanting to be listened to, wanting solidarity, or wanting feedback and advice or an opinion, is that remember when you're on the receiving end of that. So when somebody says to you, I actually just want to be listened to. Yeah. Sometimes what can happen is if we are sourcing our significance from other people needing our opinion, other people needing our advice, or we actually need to play this role where we're performing a certain task for them, like telling them what to do or making their life easy, whatever it might be. And that is meeting our own need of significance, or that forms the bedrock of how you know how to connect in relationships or give and receive love. And there's not a lot of other skill sets in terms of how you source and feel significant, like you're valuable and worthy as a person, other than people pleasing, or giving your opinion and advice, or listening all of the time. That if somebody, you know, requests something from you that is not what you want to give, right? You're like, well, actually, I would just like to give my advice right now. Or actually, you know, I'd just like to talk about when I felt this way too, because I want to feel heard. Whatever the other person is asking for from you, it's not personal. Yeah. It is not about you. They don't hate you. They aren't shutting you out and they aren't shutting you down. They're doing their best to regulate their own nervous system, to ask for what they need, and to be in the stage that they're in, right? One of my very close girlfriends in particular, we move through all three of these stages. So when one of us is like just noticing, oof, there's something there for me to look at around this thing. Yeah. Or an event happens in our life, right? And so for example, I was in an accident last year, and we're not ready to go into like more of it's like, I actually just need to speak this thing out and nothing more. So that would be the listening stage where we'll have a conversation and one of whoever's sharing will say, obviously, like at some point I'll want your advice or feedback on this, but right now I actually just need to be listened to because I can't even comprehend that next step yet. And when we let ourselves be where we're at in the process, yeah. And so, for example, with an accident, there was like a stress release process in that. Um, we love ourselves really well, and we love another really well when we let them be there. And it also means that we typically then progress through the other stages as well. So a reminder when you're on the receiving end of these requests, yeah, of, hey, I don't want any feedback today. I just want to be listened to. That is not personal and it's not about you. All right, beautiful. That is all I have to say for today on this topic. If you have found something new from this conversation or there's been this massive like standout aha moment, I'd love to hear. Also, start using this and come and let me know in my DMs on Instagram how it's going for you and what changes you notice. I'd love to hear from you on that. Okay. Bye, my love. Thank you for being here for this conversation, my love. If you would like more free resources, if you'd like to learn about my programs or coaching opportunities, you can find all of that information at my website, gemmahanley.com. I'll link it below in the show notes. And if you would like to connect daily, head over and find me on Instagram. My handle there is Gemma E. Hanley, and I reply to all of my DMs there personally. If you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please share it with someone. You never know who needs to hear one little thing to take their day from feeling stuck and heavy to light and free. See you on the next one.